Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borgognoni and Matthew Betz.
Hello! We're leading up to NFL Draft Week here with Borg and Betz. And Betz, it could not be any cooler than what we're doing right now. You and I have had quite an eventful night before recording. Let's just recap for the people, how we got in the mood to record a DFS podcast in April. What were you doing tonight?
Yeah, well, first off, people need to know what I'm looking at right now on my screen. It is you at a high top table with decaf coffee in your hand and slippers on. So I think that you are peak adulting right now, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't also wearing a pair of slippers, drinking a cup of green tea. Man, we are just killing adulthood right now. I'm not sure if we could improve upon the status that we're at right now. So this is going to be a great show. I'm excited.
Yeah, if you're listening to us and you're thinking, hey, I'm in my slippers too, well, you're in good company. But yeah, this is what happens when you're in your 30s and you get to record a football podcast in April. But we are going to get to talk about something that we're super stoked. We got a week from today. Think about that, Betz. A week from when we're recording, we will have the NFL draft. So we're going to get to break that down. If this is your first time with us, this is DFS for the rest of us. This is a chance for you, if maybe DFS or BestBall or draft props, if those things are kind of intimidating, Betz and I kind of get to break those down in a really, really simple way. And this show specifically is geared towards the NFL draft, geared towards our favorite props from the DraftKings Sportsbook. We'll walk through the first 12 picks, which goes all the way up to your Eagles bets. So we'll see how that goes. And
no question about it. I'm ready to be heard again this year. No question.
That's, and I tweeted this out too. I mean, I feel like we're in the same situation. Myself as a Falcons fan, you as an Eagles fan, like I'm teaching my children right now about disappointment. And so with the fourth pick, there's a lot of things that could go great. And there's a lot of things that could just break my heart. So we're in a good position. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can follow Betz at the Fantasy PT, myself at Kyle_Borg. And I wanted to start us off with a quick question before we jump into draft talk and some of our props, Justin Fields, who we are obligated to talk about. I want to quickly do a quick question about BestBall. And right now you can play BestBall on a number of different sites. We play a lot on Underdog Fantasy, but Betz, let's talk about BestBall and let's just talk right now. ADP before the draft, who are a couple of surprises? Who's someone that you're looking at? You're like, wow, this guy's going way too late. This is a surprise.
Our loyal listeners who have been with us since last year are going to hear me say this name and they're going to say, Betz, you silly goose. We talked about this guy too much last year when we talked about best ball values, and it was DJ Chark. And there was a reason that we were so excited about him as being a value last year because of the process, right? You saw a breakout from him 2 years ago, or 2 seasons ago, I should say. And we were expecting better quarterback play from Gardner Minshew. Clearly, it didn't work out. It was just a mess, right? He dealt with injuries, and it didn't work out. That's what happens in fantasy, as a lot of our listeners have come to learn. There is heartbreak, and that was a lot of my best ball rosters with DJ Chark. However, I'm going back to the well. I'm excited about this Jacksonville offense to a degree, given that I think it can't get worse than what we saw last year, and we're going to see improved quarterback play with Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. And now we're talking about a player who's dropped almost like 4 rounds in ADP compared to where he was going in August of last year. He is also all the way down at wide receiver 33 off the board, 73rd overall for DJ Chark. I think he's a great value, and I think the Jaguars offense in general is a good value because you can stack Lawrence and Shenault and Chark or your boy Marv if you want to in best ball at a really reasonable ADP to get that stack. You're not paying a premium to go up and get that. And we talked about that division just being one of the worst in football. The defense is projected to be bottom 10 in several categories. So excited about DJ Chark this year. I think he's like the ultimate post-hype sleeper here for 2021.
No, I love that pick because last week you mentioned the Jaguars as a team that, could be kind of sneaky in terms of there might be bad, they're projected 3rd in their own division, but yeah, they're definitely stackable in terms of those options. So I love that DJ Chark pick. I'm going to go with another wide receiver. It's going to sound like a homer pick, But Julio Jones right now is going as the wide receiver 17. He's going 44th overall. So he's a mid 4th round pick, mid till even late. And I wrote this in my notes, Betz. This is it's pretty deep here. It says he eats receiving yards for breakfast. And
lunch.
You may think Julio Jones, he was hurt last year. He only played in 7 games, but Julio ranked 4th in yards per route run last year. This wasn't just like he fell off a cliff. When he played last year, he was good. And with BestBall, the thing is, you might be afraid of injuries. You might be afraid of his age. He's 32 years old. You're not trying to get 3rd or 4th place in BestBall. Like, you're trying to get first. And so if you're assembling a roster, I want someone that can be my wide receiver 2, that can go bananas and still go top 5. The Ballers released their wide receiver rankings this past week, and they're much higher than a lot of the consensus. And I agree with them. I think Julio still has it. I think it's a great bounce back year. So if you can get him at wide receiver 17, I think that's a pretty good deal. So if you want more BestBall content, we're going to be releasing that as this kind of year unfolds. After the draft, we'll kind of get a better lay of the land, and Betz and I are going to release some of our BestBall rankings in June. And then in June and July, we're going to go through some BestBall shows of how do you construct rosters, what's some different ways to do it. We're going to do this actually on the show. So BestBall season is super fun because in June and July, you're not quite at your draft, for the regular season. We're not quite in DFS season for September. So June and July is a great time to practice and put a little money on it and see if it's going to pay off long term. So any last thoughts, Betz, on BestBall season?
No, I think it's I've been doing a couple actually before the NFL draft. I'm a sicko, man. You know that about me. But it's kind of a good way that if you are high on a rookie before the NFL draft, before you know their landing spot, where their ADP is likely going to skyrocket or plummet, if you can kind of be ahead of the curve and you kind of know what's going on, maybe the conversation we'll have tonight, what we had on last week's show about these rookies, can be helpful to get ahead of the curve, so to speak, with this rookie ADP in BestBall. So I've been doing that a little bit, and obviously there's some risk involved. I'm not playing with crazy money right now, but it is fun to get involved and have a little skin in the game. And then, when these guys land at a spot that's favorable, you're like, wow, look at that. I was so smart. I took him 2 rounds ahead of ADP where he is in August. So fun to do, fun to get ahead of other people playing BestBall right now.
If you want the cheapest price on the DFS pass, then right now is the best time to do it with UDK Plus. The Ballers next week are going to be running a special. You can get in on some awesome prizes, maybe even a listener link spot, some big giveaways. So next week is the week before the NFL draft to jump in. And this year, the UDK Plus includes the UDK, the Dynasty Pass, and the DFS Pass, where we're going to have all of our content this year. So yes, go online, ultimatedraftkit.com, and you can get that. But let's talk about some rookies.
Hey, rookie, welcome to the NFL.
I love that drop. That's a good drop.
It's a good one.
So we want to talk about some of our favorite NFL draft props, and we teased this last week. Betz and I teased some of our favorite ones that you and I placed some wagers on, and we want to come back and just re-emphasize the ones that we feel the strongest about right now. And so realize that things change within a week in terms of sports books because people are putting money down and we get different information. So right now, it looks a lot different from where Mac Jones or Justin Fields or Trey Lance, like all of these guys, we're getting different news. We're getting news about my boy Terrace Marshall Jr. that's plummeting his draft stock, which hopefully I think he's fine, but things are changing right now. And so when it comes to draft props, Betz, how do we navigate, what the public thinks and our own opinions and the lines? Like, what's the best way to kind of maneuver through that? Because you're really working with like 3 or 4 different things. So what's the best starting place to figure out which draft props to even jump on?
Yeah, it can be a little overwhelming because it seems like daily at this point, we're 7 days out from the draft. It feels like there's news every single day in regards to the draft or a different rumor or a workout or a new injury that's popped up in their history. And, so it can be a lot of noise. But the way that I go about this is kind of looking at a couple different things. One is just trusting people that have been historically good at mock drafts over the course of time. Peter Schrager is a name that comes to mind. He's been great. Obviously, Daniel Jeremiah with the NFL Network. He's super plugged in. So when you look at their mocks, what I like to do is kind of compare they release them basically periodically every few weeks. So sometimes they'll do 2 or 3 or 4. But when you look at kind of what happened from their mock from the second one to the third one, or the third one to the fourth one, like what's changing and what information are they gathering and how can we adjust that in our lines and find value? The other thing is just embrace the variance. You know, no one thought Daniel Jones a couple years ago was going to go 6th overall or whatever it was, right? No line had that. Like he was probably at like 15.5 or 16.5, something like that. So things like that happen all the time. And, you know, to be truthful, we don't really know what's going on in these GMs' minds or these head coaches' minds and kind of where they're leaning. So I think embracing the variance and going for a couple long shot bets that you may not otherwise have taken, you know, in a different sport or at a different time of year in the NFL can be really advantageous and obviously can pay off in a huge way. For example, last year, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was like the 4th favorite running back to go first overall compared to the other running backs. He went in the first round and shocked everyone. It was a huge payoff. So I think finding some value that are long shot bets that you like might sound scary because you're like, man, I don't want to lose money on this. But you hit one of those or 2 of those and your night is made. So I would say embrace the variance with this because it's going to be a wild Thursday night next week.
And that's the thing. I think the point that you brought up is most of us have locked in what we think is just going to happen because we've seen it in so many mock drafts. But when you look at people like Daniel Jeremiah, Peter Schrager, compare them with 2 or 3 others that you really like. You know, create an index where you take 5 people, you know, maybe 5 to 10's a lot, but 5 that you really trust and kind of see the variance, see what's actually changed over time. And you can see that there's players that are great values. And let's talk about this first one right now. You wrote up an article about NFL draft props. And this first one is one that we both really liked even a week ago, and it's changed. It's Jalen Waddle under 11.5 draft position. It was minus 112. Now it's minus 125. We got it, or I got it at plus 101. So it's changed where it seems like Jalen Waddle, based on, you know, what we see in front of us, that he's going to go in that top 10 or 11. So where do you stand on this? And you compare it with the other bet too.
Yeah, for sure. This is one that I jumped on too. You know, we're just hearing more rumors as the weeks go by that maybe Waddle is going to be taken as the second wide receiver ahead of Devonta Smith. So I like that, you know, under 11.5. So basically you're saying, is he going to go at 11 or better, Giants or better basically here? And there's tons of teams that need wide receiver help in the top 10, right? Look at the Dolphins. They could use some wide receiver help. The Lions, they could use every position help. You know, the Giants, of course, have been linked to a wide receiver a little bit here and there. So there's teams where that could happen. And also in Peter Schrager's most recent mock, the Cardinals actually were mocked to come up and take Jalen Waddle. And ironically, right before we started recording, I hopped on Twitter to see if there was any news or anything. And I saw a post from the Cardinals official Twitter account, which probably has no connection to this, but there was an article they put out about previewing the wide receiver position in the NFL draft. The cover boy was Jalen Waddle. Take that for what you want. I don't know. But there's some more smoke around this going higher than Devonta Smith. And you can actually bet that head-to-head on DraftKings Sportsbook. It was minus 112. It's now minus 150 for Jalen Waddle to be taken ahead of Devonta Smith. I hopped on both of those, so I'm pretty excited to see that closing line value move in our favor. We've had a couple of bets that have moved the opposite direction, so it's good to see one kind of trending towards what we think will happen.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Waddle in a second when you and I walk through the first 12 picks and kind of compare. But this other one, I mean, I still don't understand this line. Micah Parsons, the Penn State linebacker, to be the first linebacker selected. It was minus 400 for a long time. Now it's gone down slightly to minus 335, but still every single mock draft has had Micah Parsons as the first linebacker taken. Now there's rumors that Zaven Collins or some of these other players but it's Micah Parsons. He's going to be the linebacker, and I feel pretty definitive about that. Do you have any other takes about that?
No, I mean, we talked about this last week. I wrote it up in the article too. You know, every mock, like you said, that you read has that there. You look at like the big boards from NFL draft analysts, they all have Michael Parsons as number 1. So if he doesn't go there, it's going to be a shock. I still think there's value. You're getting it at minus 335 right now. When I bet it, it was minus 400. So it's kind of a little unnerving to see it go in the opposite direction. I've also seen his over-under drop from like 10.5, 11.5. It's now at like 13.5. So again, that's trending a little bit in the wrong direction. But I still think there's some good value on this bet just because of the fact that, like you said, you know, every mock you see, he's the first linebacker off the board. So for my bankroll, I hope this is correct.
Running back is probably the position that is the most enigmatic in terms of, you talked about last year with CEH, and you're like, oh, we did not see him be the first running back drafted. Most of us and most mocks have had Najee Harris, but things are starting to move in the other direction where Travis Etienne looks like maybe he could be the guy. I know Schrager had him to the Redskins, which puzzled a lot of people, but right. Oh man. Yeah, you're right. Football team. Etienne right now, first running back selected is plus 150. So you're still feeling good about that one?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's pretty good value on that because of the fact that, like you said, the market is sort of just, I think, assuming it's going to be Najee Harris, and they're not really factoring in, like you said, that's the most difficult position to project in terms of which teams are going to actually pull the trigger on running back early in the draft, because it's not an advantage to do that, but some teams will. It's looked like there's some smoke around Najee Harris to the Steelers at 24, so maybe you kind of lose out on that. But the fact that Schrager is coming out and saying, I feel confident enough to put this pick here with Washington football team, which makes zero sense in my opinion after what we saw with them hitting on Antonio Gibson as a mid-round pick last year. I don't know. It seems silly to me for a franchise that seems to be trending in the right direction. That's pretty smart, but clearly there's something to it, right? And we're also seeing some good closing line value in terms of where his over-under is going. Started at like 34.5 or 35.5. It's now down to 33.5. So that does, that correlates with the first running back off the board, but that line isn't changing. And so if you like that, you can go ahead and take the plus money with first running back off the board and understand that the other market is going with you. It's just not adjusting the price. So that's the best value bet if you're interested in betting some running back props here on the draft.
Yeah. If you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said it was Najee Harris. I'm under the impression now that Travis Etienne will be the first running back, and he actually will be selected somewhere in the first round, but that could obviously change. Let's go through two more really quickly. Let's talk about your Eagles, because right now there's a bet that's the Philadelphia Eagles take a wide receiver with their first draft selection at plus 150. Right now they have the 12th pick, and we'll go through that in just a second, but why is that a good bet to make?
Yeah, this is written up in detail on the site, so definitely check it out. But yeah, I'm an Eagles fan, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm biased towards this. This is a bad team, man. This is a bad group of weapons. You're talking about a potential 3 wide receiver set starting with Travis Fulgham, Jalen Reagor, who I hope turns out to be good, but we have no clue, and Greg Ward. And they're trying to give Jalen Hurts a chance to see if he's the guy. If you run him out there with those weapons, it's not going to work. They have to give him a fair chance. And you look at this city, you look at this fan base, how passionate they are, and how just so sick everyone was of missing on Justin Jefferson and DK Metcalf in back-to-back seasons. I don't think Howie Roseman makes that mistake again, or maybe he will, and I'll just be hurt forever. But there's no way that he doesn't take a wide receiver, in my opinion. Now, we've seen some cornerbacks mocked there, and I can understand that. The secondary was one of the worst in the NFL last year, so that makes sense. But looking at that starting roster, man, and if you want to give Jalen Hurts a chance to succeed, you have to take a wide receiver here, in my opinion. We've also had some, mock drafts coming out and some rumors too of the Eagles wanting to potentially move back up in the draft. And you're not going to do that for a corner, because we know all these top 10, top 12 picks, they're going to be offensive players. That's kind of what every mock has been. So if they want a corner, they can just stay pat and they'll be fine. But I think if they're going to move up, it's for a wide receiver.
This is my soapbox for a second, Betz. If you'll just come with me, you don't have to stand on the box with me, but I have such a hard time understanding people mocking trades, and actually putting them in, because the reality is, you're playing around with so many different teams that you don't understand what the other team actually needs. There's news today about Denver. It said, we haven't talked to anybody about moving up. And that might just be a smokescreen. But reality is, you can't just pick and choose. This isn't fantasy football. It's real teams, real assets. And so it's really hard for me to look at the board and say, this trade's going to happen. And so when we do our mock in just a second, you and I are just going to go as the board is right now, a week before the draft. But it's just hard for me to think the Eagles move back so they can move up. The Dolphins did that a couple of weeks ago, but this close to the draft, it just seems silly. So
yeah, I agree with you. And also there's been a lot of, not data, because no one's researching this, but when you just look at year after year, the mocks that have trades in them, they almost never come to fruition. So I'm with you. The mocks that you see with trades, it's meh, maybe, but probably not.
For sure. Let's do one more that's fun. And it is right now on DK Sportsbook, you can get Offensive Rookie of the Year. And Trevor Lawrence is the favorite at plus 200. Justin Fields plus 400. Zach Wilson plus 600. Mac Jones plus 700. So the quarterbacks are the favorite because that's usually how these awards are handed out. But is there anybody on this that you really like? I'll just say I like the running backs. They're at a much greater value. You can get Najee Harris plus 1,600 and ETN plus 1,800. I just feel like those are great values if they have the type of season. If ETN has like 15 combined touchdowns, through the air and on the ground, like it's totally possible. And I just think those are way better than some of these others. Like I cannot see Zach Wilson winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's just not in the realm of possibilities for me.
Is that because of his Chipotle order?
That's part of it. And some people say he has a punchable face. I won't disagree with them.
Just not agree.
I'll just not say anything. But what do you like in terms of Offensive Rookie?
Yeah, when you look at the historical winners of this award year after year, like you're saying, it's usually quarterbacks and running backs. And the reason is they play the most, right? Like these wide receivers usually take a year or two to develop in the NFL. So it doesn't happen that you get a Justin Jefferson season like last year very often. So the best value bets are the quarterbacks and are the running backs. So I agree with you. I like Najee Harris at plus 1,600. I like Travis Etienne at plus 1,800. I also like Justin Fields and Mac Jones because, we're going to talk about the Niners in a second, but presumably they're taking one of those two guys, and they're taking those two guys, in my opinion, to start. And so when you make these bets, you need to be making bets on quarterbacks that are actually going to play football this year. Otherwise, they will not do very well on not accrue statistics. That's how it works. So I think Justin Fields and Mac Jones, who, you could bet both of them and still make money on this. If they're the starting quarterback for a roster loaded with Debo, Ayuk, George Kittle, etc., and your offensive coach is Kyle Shanahan, that could be exciting.
Yeah, and those lines are going to move like once we find landing spots. So we mention it right now before the draft because I think that there are some values and we like the running back. So let's battle it out.
DFS Battle Royale.
So during the season, Betz and I do a segment called Battle Royale where we get to kind of go head to head, usually about some picks. And so we're going to do that right now with these mocks. And the way this is going to work is we're going to walk through the first 12 picks and we're going to tell you the betting favorite. And then we're going to each give our picks. So Betz and I made our mocks without each other seeing it. And also the hardest part about mocks is you're not necessarily saying this is what I would do. Like for a team, like we want to be able to, put on a team like a rational decision. Like this is what you should do, but that's actually not what happens. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, like the Giants have shown like they don't care. But we're going to talk about the betting favorites, and then we're going to talk about what we actually think is going to happen and some values. So we really can almost skip the first pick. Because it's Trevor Lawrence, and it would be insane for anyone to try to bet that. It's minus 10,000. So good luck winning any money on that thing. Don't do it. But let's go to the second pick. And then I also just need to add this in. Betz, I know you're looking at this right now. It is a thing of beauty in our show doc.
Dude, this is great. Like our listeners, they don't even know. There is no one in the industry, I can guarantee you with this statement, that goes as hard as Kyle on a show doc. It is fantastic. Explain to the people what you have done.
Yeah, guys, show doc, I mean, that's part of my job. It's what I get to do for the footballers, for the main show, and for our DFS, I get to build it out as well. But I build out just like a simple table, our 12 picks and betting favorites. But for each team, I had to find a logo that would get me pumped up. And what I found was the logo that goes on the back of the starter jacket. So if you were cool enough to have a starter jacket, I wasn't in elementary, middle school, then you were going places. I was telling Betz, if you had the Charlotte Hornets starter jacket in the 90s, like you were it. Like you could retire then. You could just drop out of school and people would have respected you for it, right?
If you had that, you peaked early. That's all I'm saying. Those things were sweet.
Those are pretty cool. So I found the old school logos, and maybe I'll tweet this out, some of this, just our chart here. But After the Jaguars, it's the Jets, and Zach Wilson is the overwhelming favorite at minus 5,000, but a betting value and one that I actually took is Justin Fields plus 1,600. I just think that's just a phenomenal value that you can get, and you really will get back a ton, especially if you don't want to put in a ton of money. But it is not a foregone conclusion that Zach Wilson's going there. The Jets haven't come out and said anything. I would prefer to take Justin Fields. That would be my opinion. But Betz, you and I are kind of lockstep. It seems like Wilson is who they're going to take.
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's literally no mock out there that doesn't have Zach Wilson there. So it would be a shock if it wasn't him. He's the pick here for me and obviously for you. But yeah, I do think, I saw Kent Wyrock, good friend of the show, and you are the only two people that I've seen say, listen, everyone, this is not a lock to go here. Like Trevor Lawrence is a lock. We know that's going to happen. We don't actually know for sure. I mean, there's a 3% chance, 4% chance, I don't know, that it's Justin Fields or someone else. But yeah, plus 1,600, if you just want to put $10 on it and hope for the best, like it's not the worst value bet in the world.
Yeah, and I did a full write-up on Zach Wilson, so I have my own opinions about him. If you want to go on the website, we have all of our rookie profiles. Betz just put out a Trey Sermon one. But yeah, in my opinion, Fields has much more upside. I think he's more what I would want in an NFL quarterback. But let's go to number 3, which is probably the pivot point of the draft. Right now, Mac Jones is the favorite at minus 150. That has fluctuated a lot over the last week. Fields was the favorite 3 days ago, and then it changed in the last couple of days. So that's been all over the place. Right now, Fields is plus 160 and Trey Lance is plus 350 if you want some values on that. So Betz, who do you think will go third overall?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot last week, and I'm going to stick with it. I think it's Justin Fields. That's who I have mocked here. Listen, I would not be shocked if it's Mac Jones. There's been a ton of smoke around it, but I can't see it being Trey Lance. And the only reason I say that is because you and I were talking today in Slack. Mike Silver from the NFL Network was basically talking in their NFL Now segment. And he said, quote, many who are familiar with Kyle Shanahan and have worked with him believe he's going to be going with either Mac Jones or Justin Fields. There aren't many people that think it's Trey Lance. So to me, that's a long shot type of situation. I think Trey Lance could work in the NFL, but listen, if you're going to trade up that much draft capital to go up to the 3rd pick in the NFL draft, where you might not be drafting this position for years to get this type of quarterback, I'm not taking a guy that came out of the FCS that hasn't played football in a year basically and only has 1 season of FCS football under his belt. So that's my opinion. Obviously we could be wrong, but I'm going with Justin Fields here. I think he is obviously the higher ceiling player, and I think he's the best fit for the Niners. So I'm going with Justin Fields.
Yes. And like I said, we talked about this a lot last week, but for us, it makes sense in terms of what they traded up. It makes sense in terms of his physical tools. And a lot of people want to say Kyle Shanahan knows how to make great quarterbacks. Yes, but he's never had someone with the type of game that Justin Fields has in terms of mobility. The dude's just tough. He's tough in the pocket. I'm actually finishing up his rookie profile right now, and I just like him a lot. So let's go to number 4, my Falcons. Right now, the favorite for the Falcons is positionally, it's a quarterback actually at it's a tight end at plus 150 and a quarterback at plus 125. So those are the two positions that you could think the Falcons, if it's Mac Jones at the Niners, then it seems like Justin Fields would then be the favorite there. Offensive line is plus 1,000. So that's up there, but we both have the same pick and it's the highest tight end ever selected, Kyle Pitts. Do you feel pretty good about that spot for Pitts?
It's sort of tricky, right? Because it all hinges on what happens with the Niners. If they take Justin Fields, talking about San Francisco, then I do think that Atlanta pivots to Kyle Pitts, which, obviously is a totally fine consolation prize. We're talking about the best tight end prospect we've seen in years. And you look at the offensive staff, right? We're talking about Arthur Smith coming from Tennessee. Kyle, did this man love a 2 tight end set, or did this man love a 2 tight end set in Tennessee?
Oh, he loved it, and he can't wait to use some Hayden Hurst.
Exactly. Paired with Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts gets a lot of love as being this perimeter pass catcher, which he's phenomenal at, but he's actually an underrated blocker in my opinion too. He can play in line if you ask him to. So I do think he fits what Arthur Smith likes to do. I think Matt Ryan's got a couple years left, and I think this team can win with Matt Ryan, and they still have Julio freaking Jones, Calvin Ridley. Like, you're talking about a better team on paper than what they've put out on the field, giving Kyle years and years and years of disappointment, but I'm still optimistic about our Falcons, Kyle. I'm calling them our Falcons because we both are on the over 7.5 wins this season. So I have Kyle Pitts going here, but like I said, it all hinges on what the Niners do, because if Justin Fields is on the board, I could totally see a scenario where that's the pick. What do you think they do? I mean, obviously you're the homer here. What do you want them to do?
One, I'm just getting hot and bothered just thinking about the Falcons. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, we're disappointing, but we're a fun team. Like, we're a fun team to root for. I love our team. But what I think they should do, oh man, it's hard with tight end because it's not a position that you normally would pay up right there. I think my dream scenario would be for Fields to fall to them. Like, I believe in Matt Ryan, but just as an organization, I think it's pretty sweet for you to have a quarterback like that fall in your lap. So, but I think Pitts will be the pick. I think it'll be helpful for what they want to do. But man, I wish there was a premium defensive prospect in this draft. And it's just, there's not anyone there, like at pick 4. So that's the hardest part for me because we need so much help on defense. But the Falcons are in a good position. I don't see them trading out of that at this point. Terry Fontenot, our new GM, was a Saints guy, and the Saints, their thing was go for it. Go all in, get your guy, whoever you want. So I think they kind of know what's in front of them, and I think it's going to be either Fields if he falls or Pitts. But on these next 2 picks, this is where we start to differ. You and I have flip-flopped these 2 picks. It's the Bengals at 5 and the Dolphins at 6. You have Penei Sewell going to the Bengals and Jamar Chase going to the Dolphins. And I have Jamar Chase at pick 5, reuniting with Joe Burrow, and Penei Sewell falling to pick 6. So what's your kind of rationale on these 2 picks?
Yeah, for me, I have Penei Sewell going first here to the Bengals. I mean, you just look at this offensive line. Like, can you even remember a year when they were good? Like, in recent memory, when the offensive line was a strength of this team, right? And now you have a franchise quarterback who's coming off of a multi-ligament knee injury with additional damage to the meniscus in his knee. Like, come on, man. This makes too much sense. They have to take Penei Sewell, kick him over to left tackle. They can move their previous high draft pick, Jonah Williams, to a guard position, upgrade their offensive line that way. To me, it's all about protecting Joe Burrow. Talk about a guy who took a lot of sacks last year. Since he was 27th in sacks allowed per game, obviously that is not good. And you're talking about a player coming off a torn ACL. You have to protect Joe Burrow. That's really the crux of the situation. I think it's going to be Penei Sewell. I think he's going to be a guy that potentially they could take, plug him in at left tackle for 8 to 10 years and not think twice about it.
Yeah, this is one of those things where what do I think they should do versus what I think they will actually end up doing. And from building an organization, Sewell's the right pick. But I think with Zach Taylor, and I think in that organization, I think they want to create something where their team is viable, it's marketable, and there is a storyline going there. So maybe that's a bit down narrative street. I also think that they spent some money in the offseason on Riley Reif to be their left tackle. So right now they technically have 2 tackles if they didn't want to move Jonah Williams. So I think the right move would be to Sewell, but I chose Chase there. And I think the Dolphins, they're at pick 6 and pick 18. This is what I think the Dolphins are going to do. They're either picking a wide receiver at 6 or 18, or they're picking a tackle at 6 or 18. If they pass on the tackle, if they do pick Jamar Chase, I think they're actually gambling, thinking that one of the elite tackles will still be there at 18. And so for me, I think they'll look at the board and they'll say to themselves, like, we want the best tackle no matter what. And whatever receiver falls to us at 18, we're just going to roll with it. So that's kind of my rationale of how I am doing that. Right now, you can get offensive line for the Dolphins at plus 400, which I think is pretty solid considering I don't see any of the teams before picking Sewell. And so you're basically saying, is it the Bengals? If the Bengals don't take him, I think the Dolphins will. So what do you think about that rationale?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And To be truthful, if I went Jamar Chase at 5, I do think the pick here would have been Penny Sewell. So I'm right there with you. Maybe this is a silly thing to say, but I'm putting some trust in the Cincinnati organization to make the right call, protect Joe Burrow. But I don't totally see your rationale there. But if Jamar Chase is there at 6, it makes a lot of sense for the Dolphins to take, like you said, wide receiver, right? We talk about, okay, well, they have Devontae Parker, they have Preston Williams. Preston Williams coming off of injury. Devontae Parker has sort of just been up and down throughout his entire career. And Will Fuller's there, but it's a 1-year deal. So I think you get a chance here to lock up an elite prospect. Most people would say he's the best in this class, and pair him with a guy who you still don't know you have in Tua. And like we talked about with Jalen Hurts just a little bit ago, you have to give these guys playmakers to give them a chance to succeed. So I think it makes a ton of sense for them to either land, like you said, with Sewell or with a weapon in Jamar Chase.
Chase right now for under 6.5, he's minus 200. And I think that's a pretty solid bet. It's hard for me seeing him fall too far. But there's also a scenario where Waddle is taken before him. Like that's still on the table. And that's where I actually have the next pick 7 with the Lions. I have Jalen Waddle going there. The Lions picking a wide receiver is plus 120. They also could pick a linebacker, Micah Parsons here. If you think that's a Dan Campbell, Guns Mahoney, let's bite their kneecaps kind of guy, maybe that's Micah Parsons. You have Mac Jones falling here to the Lions. So what are your thoughts on Jones dropping here?
I mean, first off, can we just acknowledge the fact that he actually said that in public to people? Like he actually said he was going to bite kneecaps off, or this team was going to be doing that. Oh gosh, I love Dan Campbell. My rationale here for Mac Jones is just that they did acquire Jared Goff, but it was almost kind of like a throw-in, right? Like in that trade to get Stafford to LA, get Goff, get a ton of first-round picks, and they're saying the right things, right? They're saying, well, we like Jared Goff, we think he's the future, we think this, we think that. I don't think they know. And, you look at this type of organization, you could go with any position here and it would be a correct, rational choice. This team just needs to get playmakers that could be a potential cornerstone of this franchise. And I think potentially if you get that in Mac Jones or maybe Justin Fields falls, etc., like there's a chance that this quarterback could be your one of the future. So that's why I have him mocked there. I kind of felt like this was a dead zone for me in the draft. Like I didn't know kind of where to go with Mac Jones if I didn't put him in San Francisco. So that's kind of why I have him there. But like I said, I just don't know that Jared Goff is really the long-term answer, or that they even think he's the long-term answer, to be truthful.
No, those are good points. These next 3 picks, you and I are actually lockstep. With the Panthers at 8, we have Rashawn Slater, the tackle out of Northwestern. Pick 9 with the Broncos, we have Trey Lance. And at pick 10, the Cowboys with Patrick Surtain. So you and I feel pretty good about this spot in terms of what these teams need. I think Slater to the Panthers is just it's a slam dunk if he's there. Like, I don't see why they would need to go anywhere else. Like, there's speculation that they would want a quarterback. Sure, if Fields fell all the way to pick 8, a lot of people are saying that. I just can't imagine why any team would pass on him. And then the Broncos, right now, Trey Lance is the favorite to go to Denver, but do you feel like that's just hard for me to bank on pick 9? There's so much that could happen before that, but why do you think Trey Lance will be their pick?
Yeah, they're the only team left in the draft after the first 3. You could maybe say 4 with the Falcons that kind of are like the quarterback needy teams if you think that they need to replace Matt Ryan in a few years. Obviously, like we said, he's got a couple years left of, I think, being a really good quarterback. But they're the last team that's like, you need to go into camp with someone else alongside of or above Drew Lock. Excuse me, I almost said Mac Jones. Drew Lock on your depth chart. It's not going to work if you roll into this season with him as the lone guy. This is a team that I like. Like, if they're a quarterback away, in my opinion, and that sounds silly to say because the quarterback is the hardest position to get right in the NFL. But if they can figure it out, I'm really excited about the Denver Broncos this year. And I think they know that. Like, they know they've got Cortland Sutton coming back. They spent a ton of draft capital on offensive weapons last year in KJ Hamler, and they've got Noah Fant and, all these guys, Jerry Jeudy, obviously. Like, they've got a lot on paper. And then you bring back Von Miller. You have a great defense and a great secondary. They need a quarterback, and I think that they know that. And John Elway has been a guy who historically has gone after quarterbacks. So that's why I have Trey Lance here. I also think they're a team, like we talked about, that could be in the mix to potentially trade up if they have someone higher on their board that's available, maybe closer up to like pick 5, pick 4, something like that. But yeah, that's why I have Trey Lance there. We'll see how he does, in the draft and how far he falls. I'm really excited to see what happens with Trey Lance because he could go third. He could go like 15th. Like he could be anywhere in the draft. I have no clue where he'll be, but I've got him at 9 in this mock.
It's a good thing that the Broncos, are so good at evaluating quarterbacks because, when you have Paxton Lynch, Tim Tebow, or Jay Cutler was actually okay, or Drew Lock, like you just see like, hey, when we spend draft capital on an early quarterback, it's gone really, really well.
You're so mean. You're so mean.
I know. And here's the thing. I'm not the biggest Trey Lance fan. I think that Denver's a team that could win now. Like they can be the second best team in that division. I think the Chargers are actually better because of the quarterback situation, but they're right there in the AFC West. But I just don't see a scenario where Locke takes a step forward, and with Lance, like I just can't see it right away. But yeah, he's the pick for us. We don't have to spend much time here on the Cowboys, but I did want to ask a question as just somebody, you're an Eagles fan, the NFC East. Pick 10's the Cowboys, pick 11's the Giants, now pick 12 is the Eagles. Like, did the Eagles realize when they traded backwards that they were going to be behind 2 of their division rivals? Like, I just didn't understand the spot. Like, I understand they had the partner with the Dolphins. They wanted to move back, but like, you're picking behind 2 teams that just want to stick it to you. Like, you're not going to be able to trade up to 10 or 11. They don't care about you. I feel like, why did they do that?
It kind of seems silly, right? Like you're saying, like they could snipe them if they wanted to. And remember a couple of years ago, Dallas Goedert fell to the Cowboys in their lap and they needed someone to replace Jason Witten, and the Eagles traded up in front of them to take him. So there's probably a little revenge happening here, but I think the Cowboys kind of are locked in, and maybe in terms of where they're going on the defense side of the ball. Like we said, we have Patrick Surtain going there. And then the Giants, man, David Gettleman, come on. Like there's no, even if he thinks he's going to snipe the Eagles, he's going to not snipe the Eagles and like miss out on a pick that he would have taken or should have taken. So I think the Eagles know that with Gettleman, it's, they'll be all right behind him. I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah. I feel like what Gettleman likes is just big, strong football players. And
football guys.
Right now, Devonta Smith is the favorite, and I just don't see him being a Gettleman type of guy. He's been like Saquon. He's been like now Kenny G. Like he wants these rocked up dudes. And so I have Micah Parsons going to the Giants. He's plus 500. So he's actually, pretty good value if you think he's going to go there. And you have JC Horn, the cornerback out of South Carolina, who's done awesome during his pro days stuff. So anything you want to say about the Giants, or do you just laugh at them and their organization?
Well, most of the time I laugh, but they've actually put together a pretty solid roster on paper. Obviously, we'll have to see if it comes to fruition. But yeah, I could totally see that scenario where it's Micah Parsons. I also think offensive line is a realistic possibility here. Like you talked about with Gettleman, like kind of liking those big, strong players. I mean, Daniel Jones, like the fumbles are real. The turnovers are real. The ball security issues are real. They were also bottom 5 in sack rate allowed last year. And if this is like that make or break type of season for Daniel Jones, give him some protection. I could see them taking an offensive lineman here as well. But yeah, I've got JC Horn mocked here. His over-under prop is at 12.5 with a little bit of juice to the under, and he's been climbing. He started kind of at like 14.5, 13.5. Now he's at 12.5. So there's been some buzz on him after the pro day. The secondary was good last year, but you're looking at now a cornerback 2 situation of either Darnay Holmes, who, Kyle, if you recall, you and I attacked him a lot in DFS last year with our wide receivers. You and me, we sure did.
In my wide receiver cornerback article, I used to write about him every single week.
Yeah, I remember it. I would read it every week and be like, yep, that makes sense. Let's fire it up again. So you're talking about Darnay Holmes as the cornerback 2, or Dory Jackson, who he's kind of flamed out with Tennessee, and we'll see what he has here with New York. But I have them mocked to JC Horn. He's just too talented of a player for me that he falls like outside of the top 12, 13, 14 picks. So that's why I have him there. We'll see.
Yeah, I think it's a little shocking to me that wide receiver is the favorite. It's plus 200 for the Giants. Like they have 3 solid starting wide receivers, like Galladay, Slayton, Shepard in the slot, Evan Ingram.
And they just outbid themselves for Kenny Galladay. That was fun to watch.
For sure. And, Evan Ingram, Kyle Rudolph, like I think that they're fine. Your boy Dante Pettis, like they've got some people. I just don't think that's
Lord.
like what they have to do there. But there is also, like we mentioned, like they're ahead of the Eagles, who desperately need a wide receiver. So I don't really know what Gettleman's going to do. But let's talk about your Eagles. Last pick we're going to talk about in this mock draft. Your Eagles. We mentioned earlier that they're the favorite to take a wide receiver here at plus 120. We both have wide receivers here. We both have Alabama wide receivers, but we have different guys. So you have Jalen Waddle. I have Devonta Smith. I just think Devonta Smith could look cool in an Eagles jersey. Like I think that could look cool. But any thoughts on this one? I know we mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, for sure. I think both these guys make a ton of sense, and you could even say it's a coin flip. I think Waddle to me makes more sense based off of this team's vision of what they're looking at for the position. And sometimes, what GMs think and what coaches think will tell us a lot about how they evaluate players. Look at what they did last year, right? Like they said, okay, let's take probably the fastest, second fastest, obviously behind Henry Ruggs, wide receiver left on the board to us in Jalen Reagor. And then they got a couple of guys late. John Hightower was a speedster. Quez Watkins was a speedster late in the draft. They brought back Deshaun Jackson to supplement the team. Like they're building around speed. And so that's why I have Jalen Waddle here. This dude's a burner. There's videos of him running a 40 next to Henry Ruggs when those two played together at Alabama, but we didn't get to see it because he had the ankle issue last year and the injury where he couldn't really run the 40 or participate in a pro day. So he's a fast guy. He's a burner. I think that's kind of what the Eagles might be looking for here based off their historical trends of where they've targeted wide receivers. So that's why I have Waddle. We'll see. I would love Devonta Smith. I would love Waddle here, but I do think, like I said, they've got to take a wide receiver. Sorry, Greg Ward.
Is that just from a team building perspective, when you're like, I have to take a wide receiver in the first round, it's a little bit like, it's cool and it's cool for fantasy. It's also like, man, we're in a really bad shape because there's so many areas in terms of team building that's like the trenches or your corners, like those are the premium positions. And then knowing that Hurts is a question mark. It's probably not a good thing I'm bringing up right now. I'm bringing up a lot of pain.
Well, it just hurts, It's like it just hurts to see DK Metcalf just dominating in Seattle and Justin Jefferson dominating as a rookie in Minnesota and watching them pass on those guys. And now we're still targeting wide receivers in round 1 or early in round 2. So yeah, listen, like I said, this team, they've got so many holes to fill that I could see a corner. I could see they need to improve linebacker play. Like they need to improve some line play. Like the veterans are aging out, this is just a full rebuild in my opinion. So any position, heck, take a punter here. We could use one of those too.
That would be a lot of great plus money. All right, let's talk real briefly as we kind of close. A couple other names beyond just fantasy, beyond just sportsbook. Give me a couple other names you're watching on draft night, and specifically first round, second round, just some names. So briefly, who are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens with a couple of wide receivers, mostly because, we're a DFS fantasy show. Rondale Moore is like this guy that draft Twitter just loves. And I just want to see, like, where does he go? Is he going to go to a scheme that wants to use him as a traditional wide receiver? That's a guy that's less than 6 feet tall and not the prototypical build. Like, how is he going to fit? So I just want to see where he goes. And then I really want to see what happens with Elijah Moore. He's been mocked to the Green Bay Packers. We saw what happened last year when people mocked the wide receiver there, but his over-under currently is 28.5, and he's climbing in terms of draft boards. So I'm really interested to see if he goes in round 1. Really talented slot wide receiver out of Ole Miss. And then my last one here is a cornerback, actually, Caleb Fartley. I'm just super interested to see where he goes in terms of how the teams view his medical situation. I had to come on here with some injury talk, Kyle, of course. This is a guy who was the odds-on favorite alongside of Patrick Surtain to be the first cornerback taken. Then he had to have surgery to remove a part of the disc in his lower back. And now he's falling in terms of where he is in the draft. So I'll be really interested to see kind of how his medicals check out, where he goes, because the talent isn't the question. It's more just the medical side of the situation. So Caleb Farley, cornerback out of Virginia Tech.
Dude, they call him Caleb Farty, and that's his family. They've gotten it for years.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Caleb.
Caleb's parents were listening in, hoping that you give some good news. You're giving some medical advice, talking about disc in his back, and then you just demean this man who's, Betz, this guy's 20, 21 years old, and you're just trashing on this guy.
Caleb Fartley.
Okay. All right, I'll give.
Oh, what a day!
I'll give you a couple of names. This is pretty on brand for me. I love Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU. There's been some medical things that have come up recently. Betz and I have talked about this, but last year he didn't really struggle with any issues. He played 7 games, then opted out. And so maybe there's something we don't know in terms of his medical testing, but if he does drop into the second round or so, hopefully that puts him in a better fantasy situation. Because a lot of people had him going to the Ravens, which, wouldn't be so great. So I'm really interested in Terrace Marshall Jr. I feel like based on this news, it's either a smokescreen where teams are trying to say, stay away from him. We want him because he's one of the few big receivers in this draft, and I love him. So either teams are saying stay away or he slips into the second or third. But I can't see him go too far. But 2 running backs, I mentioned Travis Etienne a little bit because I have a wager on him being the first running back. But for fantasy, I think we're going to be talking about him this year as Alvin Kamara light. And then Kenny Gainwell out of Memphis. He's a fun player. He's super fun in terms of PPR. I'm really interested to see where he'll go. Probably a day 2 guy, whatever, but maybe even day 3. He's not as big as we want, but Kenneth Gainwell is a player that I'm super interested in. So, Betz, I'm pretty pumped about the draft. I know you're pretty pumped about it. And I can't wait to see some of these things. I mean, you and I, Justin Fields is going to make us some cash, and we're really thankful for it.
All he's got to do is go under 4.5. The boys will be buzzing. Let's go. Enjoy draft night, everyone. It's going to be a fun time.
Have a good week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.